Hello and welcome to episode 304 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. Today on the show, we tackled a logical reasoning question. It was actually one of the LSAT's most common flaws.
Big opportunity to learn, right? Like that's one where,
yeah,
if you struggle with that question at all, you're going to continue to get beat up by that exact issue on basically every test. So
yeah,
low hanging fruit for sure. Make sure you understand that logical reasoning question. Everybody at every level needs to be able to answer that question correctly.
Yep. We then went into two pearls versus turds. We had one pearl and one turd. The pearl was an Ironman and based on an Ironman triathlon.
A lot of fitness
tip.
on today's show.
Yeah, today is kind of a fitness oriented show, it seems. Then we had a turd about reading comp. Then we had a question, the mailbag in there. We had an overbearing parent. We had, I would say the biggest discussion was on this student who wanted to go from a 123 to a 157 and our advice for everyone along that path from 123 to 157 or really higher. And then finally we had another fitness analogy from our very own David. So
yeah, David is one of our newest teachers on the team, and he's a previous guest on the podcast. He wins episode 304 of the Thinking LSAT podcast for sure because of this advice about, specific advice from a different realm about literally slowing down to speed up.
Yeah. Cool. Well, this will air on Monday, June 28th. The August LSAT registration deadline is July 2nd. So not too far off, 2 days before July 4th. Then the August LSAT test week starts Saturday, August 14th. If you have not already signed up for a demon-free account, I would suggest you do so and then start coming to Nathan's August 2021 LSAT study group.
Specifically at this iteration of the August 2021 LSAT study group, because it is going to be before the deadline. It's going to be the day before the deadline to sign up for the August LSAT. Yeah. And so you can bring your questions about, should I sign up for the August LSAT? We'll definitely be talking about that at this free study group on Zoom. When is that? And how do people sign up?
Yeah, so that's Thursdays, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's every week. As soon as the August one is over, Nathan, I'm assuming you're going to pick up a new study group for the next test, right?
And it's great. These are like my favorite thing that I do. Well, podcast number one, hanging out with you, Ben, is always my favorite. Second thing I do favorite every week is certainly this study group. It's really fun. It's a big, like, dynamic group of people who are really excited about improving. And I love being able to, connect to people for free and help them as much as I possibly can, including, it's all right now. That's going to be the big decision is like, okay, well, deadline is tomorrow. Should I register or should I not register? So we'll probably spend the entire hour, I would imagine, talking about that decision.
Yeah. So if you don't have a demon free account, you go to lsatdemon.com, you click on start for free. It's a big button all over the place. You create an account, and then once you're logged in, you just click on classes, and you will see on Thursdays Nathan's August 2021 LSAT study group. One click and you're registered. Come back and you can join the Zoom meeting at the same place. So cool. All right, let's jump into this question. This is a logical reasoning question from Test 73, Section 2. It's question 9.
Columnist says, research shows significant reductions in the number of people smoking, and especially in the number of first-time smokers in those countries that have imposed stringent restrictions on tobacco advertising.
Okay, so this first sentence is telling me at least two things. One, that the number of people smoking, especially first-time smokers, has dropped significantly in some countries. And I know that those countries have also imposed stringent restrictions on tobacco advertising. Okay, so smoking has dropped, smoking advertising has dropped. I can almost anticipate, I know where this is going to almost certainly go. They're going to say, hey, these two things happen together. So I know that the drop in advertising is responsible for, or something like that, for the drop in smoking.
How do you know they're going to do that?
Well, I don't know it for sure, but I'm pretty confident they are because they do it so often. It's such a commonly tested flaw.
Okay, so the argument continues. This provides substantial grounds for disputing tobacco companies' claims that advertising has no significant causal impact on the tendency to smoke.
Okay. So this provides substantial grounds is basically saying what I just told you is evidence for what I'm about to tell you. So we're about to read a conclusion, which is what I was anticipating. And the conclusion is basically saying that tobacco companies are wrong, essentially, for saying that advertising does not affect people's ability or tendency to smoke. In other words, this person thinks advertising does affect their tendency to smoke. So it's not exactly what I predicted, but it is this causal argument, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is exactly what you predicted, really, right? Once you unraveled it, they throw in that weird double negative there. This provides grounds for disputing the tobacco companies when they say that advertising has no significant causal impact. Well, what they are saying there is exactly what Ben predicted, which was so because of this correlation, there is a causal relationship. Yeah. So you nailed it totally. And then, yeah, that I totally agree. That second sentence, you have to translate it, but it's always a reading comprehension test first.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Ben did a nice job there of, and by the way, because you had predicted where you thought they were going to go, they did go there, but they went there in a very convoluted way. But your prediction, I think, helps you to catch that they did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That's a big part of reading comprehension, is to make predictions about what you think you're going to read next.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to go a little abstract here. You don't need to go abstract, but I do tend to think of these things in this way. This argument essentially said two things are happening together. Smoking is going down. Advertising is going down because it's being restricted. Therefore, the drop in advertising is essentially causing the drop in smoking. So A and B, two things happen together. Therefore, A causes B. That's what this argument is essentially saying. And when I see this framework, I tend to think, wait a sec, how do I not know that something else didn't cause the drop in smoking and the drop in advertising, right? So like these days, I don't think younger people are smoking as much, right? Like, so maybe it's just not cool anymore. So something else causes both, right?
Right.
Or maybe the causal relationship is actually reversed. So yeah, smoking dropped, but that actually led to a drop in advertising because now tobacco companies can't afford it. I don't know if that's possible, but that's certainly well, I do know that's possible. I don't know if that's likely, but it's certainly possible. And given that possibility, maybe this correlation proves a different causation.
Perfect. It says, which one of the following, if true, most undermines the columnist's reasoning?
Okay, so it's a weakened question. Not surprising since we had a flawed argument going from correlation to causation. I'm expecting one of the two things I just predicted. Either something else caused both of these things, or maybe the causal relationship is reversed.
Okay. I guess I would like to point out here, remember, Ben, when we were talking about the 3 periods on a like the pauses, we made an analogy to ice hockey, that hockey has 3 periods and there's a break between the first and second period, and there's a break between the second and third period, people frequently come to us with like, well, I know that you keep saying to slow down, but how do I slow down? And we invited people to break even more frequently than that.
Yeah.
Basically after every sentence, or even halfway through, if there's a comma or something like that, that might be a good place to stop. But for sure, on LSAT logical reasoning, you definitely want to stop after the argument or the passage, which Ben totally did here. And he said, hey, wait a second, that's a correlation to causation argument. How do you know it's not reversed? How do you know it's not some alternate cause? So he stopped after the passage and registered some objections. Then after the question, he stopped again. And there he registered the question type, which turns out to be weaken. And he sort of doubled down on his prediction, right? We're kind of always looking to weaken these arguments. And so when you said, oh, it's a weaken question, oh, okay, good. So it's probably one of those two things that I already was yelling about, which was, how do you know it's not reversal of cause and effect? How do you know it's not some other alternate cause?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So those are just a couple places where people can stop if they're looking to slow down, because most of you need to slow down.
Yeah.
Those are a couple of opportunities to slow down.
And as you pointed out, I doubled down on the weaknesses that I'd found because there were weaknesses. If this had been a strengthened question, on the other hand, I still would have focused on those weaknesses, but I would have put myself in the frame of mind to look for an answer that would get rid of those weaknesses, right? As opposed to an answer that would reinforce them. So there is still that value, even if we're just doubling down.
Oh, absolutely. If it was a strengthened question, you would have said, oh, well, my argument is weak because it confuses correlation for causation. So I need to disprove all alternate causes. I also need to disprove the possible reversal of cause and effect.
Yeah.
If it was a strengthened question, you're just playing for the other team. But okay, what if it was a flaw question?
Then I would get ready for an answer that would describe one of those possibilities.
Right. On a weakened question, the correct answer is going to like attack the flaw. On a flaw question, the correct answer is going to describe the flaw.
Yeah.
Right. So describing the flaw is like, look at the chink in the armor right there. There's a huge gap between your breastplate and your armored pants.
Trying to bring back the medieval
the chink in the armor, right? Like that's what a flaw question does, is it says, hey, you got a big hole in the armor right there. A weakened question takes a sword and jams it into the hole in the armor.
Exactly. Yeah. It takes advantage of it versus just describing.
And what would a strengthened question do?
A strengthened question seals it up with
patch the hole in the Gorilla Glue. Yeah, perfect. Ye old Gorilla Glue. Yeah. Okay. All right. It's a weakened question. A says, people who smoke are unlikely to quit merely because they are no longer exposed to tobacco advertising.
Okay. This is kind of consistent with the passage. Actually, the premise talked about how there's been a reduction in the number of people smoking, but it seems to have been greater among first-time smokers. So there's not as many people who even start smoking, which means that people who do smoke are less likely to be affected by this drop in advertising, or just haven't been as affected. And this is consistent with that. So it's not hurting the argument. It just says they're unlikely to quit, but it doesn't mean they can't, and it doesn't mean they're not.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I mean, the columnist wants to say the reduction in advertising led to a reduction in smoking, but specifically first-time smokers. A kind of says tobacco's addictive in a way.
Yeah.
Or like once people start smoking, they don't care about the advertising anymore. So I do think that it's like, it's maybe weakening the wrong thing.
Yeah, I just wonder if it even weakens it though, because it just says they're unlikely to quit. So okay, it's not a high possibility, but they still could. And I'm not surprised that they're not quitting
and
as
the
much as.
merely too, right? Because like what A is suggesting is, well, there's other factors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, but everybody knows that smoking kills you. So no, they're not quitting merely because they're no longer exposed to tobacco advertising. They're quitting because their doctor's yelling at them about it, their kids are yelling at them about it, and if they no longer see these ads all the time, well, then maybe the combination of those things could lead to a reduction in smoking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So I bet if people miss this, they probably pick A. Anyway, Ben dismissed it pretty quickly. B, broadcast media tend to have stricter restrictions on tobacco advertising than do print media.
Okay, my initial gut reaction to this is I don't really care about the difference between broadcast and print. The argument just talked about advertising in general, right? Yeah, tobacco advertising. Um, so the fact that media or broadcast media tends to have stricter restrictions is like, okay, but they could still all be strict. I don't really know what to make of this. So it doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, but yeah, good point. B's like, well, you can't put Joe Camel on the Saturday morning cartoons because that's broadcast media, but you can put Joe Camel, in the comic books with the exact same characters because that's print media. But so what? What does that have to do with whether restrictions on advertising result in people smoking less?
Yeah.
C says restrictions on tobacco advertising are imposed only in countries where a negative attitude toward tobacco use is already widespread and increasing.
Okay. So this is saying that the restrictions, the advertising restrictions that we were just talking about, happen in countries, only in countries, by the way. That's a pretty strong wording. Yep. Only in countries where negative attitudes is already widespread and increasing. So now essentially what this answer choice is doing is saying there's a correlation between restrictions and negative attitudes, which means there's also a correlation between restrictions, negative attitudes, and people not smoking. So now it's like, oh, okay, we have three things that are correlated, three things that are happening together. How do I not know that it's not the negative attitudes that's leading to the drop in restrictions, or I mean, I guess the increase in restrictions and the drop in smoking?
Yeah.
This provides an alternative explanation, an alternative cause. And so this doesn't disprove the conclusion, but it certainly weakens it.
Yeah, Ben was looking for, way back when he first read the argument, he was like, correlation doesn't really mean causation. How do you know it's not the other way around? Or how do you know there's not some other explanation? I'm not sure whether C is an alternative cause or it actually might be the reversal of cause and effect.
Well,
in a way, right? What I'm saying is,
well, the negative attitudes lead to the drop in smoking, right? Probably.
Well, so negative attitudes / people are already quitting smoking is what I'm saying, right? Like, it could just be that this is the direction that society's already going and the restrictions on advertising are following, but this was a trend that was already happening. And so it's kind of in that way, it's like, well, how do you know it's not the other way around? Right. Like the fact that everybody's already quitting smoking makes it easier for us to impose these restrictions on tobacco advertising.
Yeah. I guess I'm separating negative attitude from quitting smoking.
Yeah. Which
is separate, but yeah,
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, reversal of cause and effect is kind of an alternative cause, right? It's like it's just like, hey, how do you know that these facts can't be explained in some other way?
Yeah. In other words, A didn't cause B, B caused A, something else caused A.
Yeah. Okay, good. So you like C a lot because it's an alternative explanation for these same facts.
Exactly.
What do you, so you pointed out that it has strong wording. Doesn't that automatically make it wrong on the LSAT? Because we can't pick strongly worded answers, can we?
That's right. Yeah, I learned a long time ago. From
Don't answer sarcastically. I'm asking a sarcastic question. You have to answer honestly.
They said to avoid extreme language. No, in a weakened question or a strengthened question, and basically a bottom-up question, which may not make sense to you, but a question that says which one of the following, if true, generally benefits from an answer choice that's more strongly worded, because it says which one of the following, if true, most undermines the columnist reasoning. A weakly worded answer could still be the one that does it the most, but it's less likely to be.
Yeah, great. Okay. D, most people who begin smoking during adolescence continue to smoke throughout their lives.
Okay, so I feel like this is repeating A almost. It's like it's hard to quit. Okay. Right. So what? They are quitting. So
good. Ben, you have adolescent kids. Do you think any of them have ever tried to smoke a cigarette?
I don't think so. Although if they have, they sure pulled the wool over my eyes.
That's good. As long as they're hiding it properly. That's a big part of the battle, is at least they should be sneaking around.
Well, if you're hiding it, right, at least you feel like
exactly.
You agree,
at least you know that you shouldn't be doing that shit. Yeah. Okay. E, people who are largely unaffected by tobacco advertising tend to be unaffected by other kinds of advertising as well.
Okay. I don't care about this for two reasons. One, I don't really care about the fact that they're unaffected by other kinds of advertising. Other kinds of advertising is irrelevant here. But I also don't care about this answer choice. And this happens a lot on the LSAT. It says people who are largely unaffected by tobacco advertising. It doesn't say how many people are largely unaffected by tobacco advertising. This could be a very, very small group. Two people who are largely unaffected by tobacco advertising. And if that's the case, then you can't claim that this drop in advertising isn't having an effect or something.
And anyway,
like
it's just like people that are impervious to advertising. So what? That's I don't care that they also don't, they're not influenced in what kind of car they buy or whatever. Like what? So
well, that's my first reason, but really the second reason is you don't know the size of this group. And so it may not affect the vast majority of people and therefore have no relevance on this general claim.
The answer is C, because it points out an alternative cause / maybe the reversal of cause and effect. And, Ben, like you predicted that. You didn't go through all of it, but I'm sure you had an idea that was going to turn out to be the answer, even after you read the very first sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like they cite a correlation. They're probably going to conclude causation from that. Alternate causes and reversal of cause and effect. It's been the answer on hundreds of LSAT questions. This question is a really good example of how learnable the test is.
We were just talking the other day about questions that seem so esoteric that they don't really have takeaway lessons, right?
Right.
This is the exact opposite, right? So I almost feel like this is a question that should show up in red in the demon. It's like, if you didn't get this, sit down and
totally. Yeah. If we were going to tag like this one, you definitely need to get this one right. Because if you miss this one, man, like you're going to miss 100 other questions.
It's okay to get it wrong, but you can't leave this until you understand it.
This is why reviewing is so important. People like they miss this question and they just move on and do the next one. Oh, let me try another one. Let me do another question. Let me do another section. Let me do another test. I want to pull that lever on the slot machine again and see if I win this time. And it's just a tragic missed opportunity, because this is the one that, like, man, you learn to not only get this one right, but you learn to predict the answer on this one. You turn a 0-point mistake into a 1-point correct answer. You also get there way, way faster because you knew the answer before you ever even read the question. And it's just because they do it over and over and over again. Cool.
Yeah. Nice. All right. So we have two Pearl versus Turds today.
Unprecedented. 2 pearls versus turds. We're going to do them back to back.
Okay. Scoreboard today is 14 pearls, 47 turds and 23 ties. I have not seen these submissions at all, but I'm just going to predict right now that the scoreboard by the end of this podcast will still be 14 pearls and it will be 49 turds.
Most of the received wisdom out there on the internet about the LSAT is bullshit and gets put into the turd pile. If you have a pearl versus turd candidate, by the way, you can email help@thinkinglsat.com or find us on social @thinkinglsat and make your suggestions there. This one's coming to us. Well, it's actually coming to us from us because this is it's Demon student Luke sharing a tip from LSAT Demon teacher Matt. Or wait, maybe it was the other way around. Maybe it was Matt. That's what it was. It was it was Luke suggesting something to Matt and Matt saying, hey, that's a good pearl versus turd. And Luke sending it to me. Luke is a current Demon Live student.
Okay. You want to read it?
Sure. Hi, Nathan. Thanks again for making the time to chat last week. I've been emailing back and forth with Matt recently. He is awesome. And he mentioned this might be a pearl versus turd submission, just passing it along to you. And so it is Luke saying, oh, I could have edited this. Oh, I see what this is. This is Luke had made a comment on Reddit. And so he says, I spend probably too much time on the Reddit LSAT community, but I saw a lot of posts concerning students worrying about ProctorU issues. I shared this short analogy that, to my surprise, got a lot of love there. Okay, and so this is what he had put on Reddit. We'll see what you think of it.
Okay.
He says, I've been reading posts where people are worried about ProctorU and LSAC issues. As someone who runs Ironman triathlon races, I thought a piece of mental prep that we are encouraged to do might be applicable. A triathlon is 3 parts: swim, bike, and run. But on race day, we actually think of it as 4. Over the course of a long race like that, there is bound to be some other factor than swimming, biking, and running. It is the 4th event. Perhaps your swim goggles get kicked off by someone in front of you. Perhaps you drop a nutrition bar while biking and need to swing by an aid station for a replacement. Perhaps it's very hot during the run and you need to hydrate more than planned. The point is to expect the unexpected and be okay with something not going quite right. The LSAT is a long test. It has 3 parts, but there are other variables simply beyond your control. Trust that you will be able to overcome a random event and keep going. Don't let a ProctorU rookie ruin your mindset. And we talked about that last week, Ben, with the ProctorU proctor that was interrupting the student. Don't let a ProctorU rookie ruin your mindset. You've prepped and trained. Don't let anything get in your way! Exclamation point, says Luke. And apparently people on Reddit thought that that was good. And it is now a pearl versus turd candidate. What do you think, Ben?
Oh, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
The sarcasm.
No, actually, I like it. I might even say I love it because when you say there's a 4th event, right, you're actually saying that this will happen. So it flips the expectation. It's like, okay, what was my 4th event? What shitty thing happened and how did I deal with it? Not, oh my God, I had 3 events, but this other thing unexpectedly happened. Woe is me. And if you don't have a 4th event, no worries. No one cares about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've got this as a pearl, but it was Natasha from Tampa, by the way, last week, who had emailed about the ProctorU proctor interrupting her to introduce himself. Like, hey, I'm your new proctor.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of her doing a reading comprehension passage. And that sucks. But we know for sure that shit like that happens.
Yeah.
And I do think that you should probably just go ahead and plan for it in advance.
Yep.
Consider that your 4th LSAT section. Is the how do we compensate? How do we catch up? How do we just like basically expect that shit's going to go wrong. I do this in golf all the time. That's my one sport that I'm even halfway decent at. And I was playing with my buddy the other day in a tournament. It was a two-person event. And he said to me in the morning, he's like, yeah, the forecast is for wind. So, let's hope that forecast is wrong. And I was like, oh no, we're not hoping that forecast is wrong. We actually should probably be hoping that forecast is right.
Yeah.
Like, yes, wind is difficult, but it's difficult for everybody. And it's less difficult for the people who are expecting it and or hoping for it. And I've learned now, let's say I've been playing golf for 35 years probably. And I have definitely learned that I do better if it's windy because it's all relative. And I should be basically hoping for bad conditions.
Yeah.
Because if like other people get blown off the golf course, right? They like lose on the first tee because they're already worried. Oh boy, this is going to be it's going to be tough out there, boys. And I'm like, good. I'm glad you guys are upset about the wind. So, okay. I think that we have found a pearl. Expect that bad shit's going to happen.
Yep.
If it doesn't, great. But when it inevitably does, you'll be happy that you you got to just roll with it.
Okay,
cool.
So I was wrong. The score is now 48 instead of 47. No, sorry. 16 or 50. You already updated.
I updated
15,
it.
Yep. 15 pearls and 47 turds with 23 ties. This is the next pearl versus turd.
Yep.
For today. Hey, Ben and Nathan, huge fan of the show. A friend asked me for RC, do you do all the passages or just 3 and guess on the last? She said that she has heard both options as advice. I told her that I never make it my goal to guess on the last section, but that I try to do the first 3 sections, I assume passages, as confidently as possible instead of rushing through them in hopes of finishing the 4th. I'm not sure if my response was good advice and thought this might be a good candidate for pearls versus turds. I apologize if this has already been a candidate. Okay. So KD continues. If time is running low on the 4th passage, would it be helpful to skip reading the passage and try to answer any questions that directly address a word or phrase in the passage? Example, which one of the following is closest in meaning to the term X, as that term is used in line 8 of the passage? The phrase why primarily refers to what. I know you both never advise reading the question stem first. However, if you are running very low on time, would it be wise to try and answer those kinds of questions above, or just try to get through the passage and guess all the same letter for the questions that follow? Thank you so much for the podcast, The Demon, your tough love and humor. Feel free to roast my grammar or punctuation from this email. I probably need it. Wow, okay, that's an invitation. I wasn't really paying attention to your grammar or your punctuation. Okay.
Well, that's from KD, by the way. Thank you, KD.
What?
The irony is that people who say, feel free to roast my grammar and punctuation, I probably need it, tend to need it less because they have realized that they can pay attention to their grammar and punctuation and get better at their grammar and punctuation. So that's anyway. I didn't notice anything there that was super gross.
Yeah. So we have 2 questions here. One, well, she said that she advised her friend to try to do the first 3 passages as confidently as possible instead of rushing through them in hopes of finishing the 4th. Okay. I think we would say, yeah, do what you can, whether that's 3 passages or 2 passages or 4 passages.
Yeah, I think she knows that that's a pearl. That is clearly, yes. You don't try to make it through all 4 passages if your accuracy is going to be low on the first 3. It's not going to be worth it. So You need to read the first 3 passages carefully, and you should feel pretty damn good about your answers for all the questions on those first 3 passages. By the way, that should already get you to 21 points in the section, right? 20 or 21 points in the section. And people need to be honest. Not that many people score 20 anything on the reading comp. And if you're not scoring 20 something on the reading comp, then you shouldn't be doing all 4 passages, because you can score 20 something by just doing 3 passages.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's clearly a pearl. I don't think I think the question that Katie's asking is, if time is running low on the 4th passage, let's say after the 5-minute warning, I think she advised this person to do these questions first.
Yeah. And I don't think it is. I would just read the passage and read it as well as you can. I just am so much more confident in my ability to go quickly when I understand the passage. And maybe you wouldn't have time to do more than 2 questions, but you're talking about doing 1 or 2 questions here. And when you read these terms out of context, I don't think your chances of getting them right are very good anyway. So
there are so many questions that are like main point questions in disguise, even when they are asking you about the meaning of a specific phrase or the purpose of a specific phrase.
Yeah.
They almost always are in service of their main point somehow, or they very frequently are in service of their main point somehow. And if you don't know the purpose, if you don't know the main point, then I just feel like you're going to fall into one of the professionally written trap wrong answers anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'm not sure that you're going to be very good at this anyway. Like I'm sure that sometimes you get it right, but I don't know. I think you might have been able to just read the passage and get 1 or 2 of them right anyway.
Yeah.
The reason why this is for sure not a pearl for me is that it has to do with shit that only matters at the tiniest of margins after the 5-minute warning has already been called, right? Like there are no pearls after the 5-minute warning has been called. At the 5-minute warning, you should bubble in guesses for everything that you haven't attempted yet. That's the only pearl, right? Is like 5-minute warning pops up on the screen. You click all the same answer for all of the questions that you have not completed yet. You should just do that automatically. Just do it robotically, just instantly. I don't care what letter you pick. Just make sure you click something for all the questions remaining in the section.
Yep.
Then go back to whatever question you were working on and try to answer it correctly. If that involves you then turning to the 4th passage at some point after the 5-minute warning has already been called, well, 6/7 of your time has already elapsed, and it just doesn't really matter that much what you do in the remaining 1/7 of your time, right? That remaining 5 minutes is time to get like 1 question right. And so I'm never gonna, like what we've decided, Ben, right? That the measure of a pearl is, am I gonna say this in class? And I'm never gonna say this in class, because it's just not, it has nothing to do with the big picture of comprehending the passages and getting the bulk of the points from the bulk of passages in the bulk of your time. Like people really love to, I don't know, it's like rearranging the deck chairs on the sinking Titanic at that point, right? It's like you've either already won or lost the section. And so it doesn't matter what you do in that last 5 minutes. I mean, make sure you bubble something in. Do 1 more question.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's any kind of like brilliant advice to, and I think that just makes it a turd, doesn't it? Because it's like, well, now you're focusing on something that is not the big picture important thing that you should really be focusing on.
Yeah. You can't let the perceived small good thing get in the way of something that's so much better.
Right. Which is for sure, make sure you guess on every question. at that point. Make sure that you got the bulk of the points that on questions you've already attempted. Because I can just see somebody like, what's going to really happen here is that the 5-minute warning is going to go off while they're almost finished with the third passage. And then what they're going to do is they're going to be thinking about this strategy of like skipping ahead and doing the questions that have that blank in it. And they're going to drop the remaining 2 questions on the passage that they already actually read.
Yeah.
And they're going to, in a rush to implement this tip that they heard for that 4th passage, in a rush to implement that tip, they're going to like make sloppy mistakes on the 3rd passage.
Yeah.
Which is, that makes it, I think, clearly a turd. Anyway, scoreboard is now 15 pearls, 48 turds, 23 ties. A lot of bad advice out there. Be careful what kind of tips you're listening to in your LSAT prep. If you have a pearl versus turd candidate, you can email help@thinkinglsat.com, or you can find us on social @thinkinglsat. Okay.
Great. Mailbag, huh?
Yep, we got 3 shortish emails in the mailbag, and that's it.
Okay. You want to take this first one?
Sure. Hi, I have been studying for the LSAT for over a year now, and I originally began with studying an hour a day, and I had a tutor with Kaplan, big mistake. My mom is an extremely overbearing parent and constantly brought me down about the amount of time I was studying for this test. When I took the February test, I received a score of 146, and she immediately threw it in my face. I have since increased my study time to 3 to 5 hours a day, and she still says I am not studying enough. Do you guys have any advice on how to ignore/get parents like this to stop? Thanks, Naya. Any advice for Naya? This is giving me pleasure because you're a parent and you have to answer the question.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it, and I'm glad that Naya has this like desire to push back at her mom.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I think people need to grow up and decide for themselves what is best.
Oh, okay. I'll tell that to your kids next time I see them.
Oh, my kids are in a different situation.
I'm gonna just play them the recording. All right, go ahead.
No, actually, it's good. I want my kids to do that. They gotta, if a kid is always beholden to what I have to say, and I'm just another parent in this or adult in this universe, they're not ready to take on life.
Yeah, and you're not going to be right about everything. You don't possibly know everything, and you do want them to spread their wings and get out of the house eventually and find their own way in the world. So yeah, they need they need to be calling bullshit on things generally, and that is unfortunately going to include you sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it sounds like Naya lives at home, and maybe Naya has to live at home, but boy, it would be nice. Are you in college to like move out and live somewhere else?
That's funny. Was exactly my first thing was like, why are you living at home?
Yeah.
Your mom is gonna bitch at you constantly if you're living at home. She's not going to have the time to bitch. She's not going to be able to bitch at you constantly or monitor your study time if you move out.
Yeah. The other thing is to try to, I'm not sure like if your practice test scores were higher than a 146 when you took the test, but it doesn't seem like you should have taken it. A good way to take control of the situation here too is to increase your score and just show her later.
True. I don't know. That's a very good point. Ultimately, it's about the scoreboard.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Naya's been studying for over a year now. And weirdly, she's talking about her 146 in February. It's June now, as we read this. Weren't there other tests in between then and now? Like, what are your practice tests? At least you should be taking practice tests. What are those practice tests saying? Because if you really are like still in the mid 140s, I think you've got like a couple choices. You need to do something differently with your prep, which may or may not mean study more. I mean, 3 to 5 hours a day is a lot. Like that's like kind of the maximum that I would ever really endorse. Right. We always talk about 1 high quality hour a day. I think your mom, if she was maybe more savvy, she would be telling you to study better.
I almost feel like, and I don't know, but there could be a lot more going on here, in the sense that maybe Naya's at home. She's not doing, maybe she was doing 1 to 2 to 3 hours of studying before. And then the rest of her time is
exactly
on screens. And her mom's like, look, you're not succeeding. You're not working enough. You're just wasting your time, and I'm supporting you. There's probably a lot more here. And her mom's just like, you need to be doing at least more. If you had a job too. And
exactly.
Like, yeah,
1,000%. Yeah. Like what your mom might be telling you is to get a job.
Like be productive, like push the ball forward.
She doesn't necessarily want you to actually get a job, because she wants you to succeed on the LSAT and go to law school. But maybe that's actually my advice, Naya, is to, if you don't already have a job, maybe you should get a job, because I tend to like it when I hear people say, oh, I'm going to school part-time and I also have a part-time job and I'm studying for the LSAT. I'm like, good, great. Because it's weird, but the busier you are, the more productive you tend to be.
Not as busy as the personal statement we read in the last.
Oh, Dre from last episode, who was working full time at a law office and bartending 20 to 30 hours a week and running an art business on the side.
Staying up until 3 and 4 in the morning. That's just
right. That's not sustainable. How it's done.
Yeah.
Right. But there's a fine line. Yeah. I mean, I generally don't endorse 3 to 5 hours worth of studying a day. So I would tell your mom, hey, mom, like that's Ben and Nathan say you don't need to study more than that.
Yeah.
But I am very curious, and so is Ben, like what you're doing with the rest of those hours. And like, if you're around the house so that mom can yell at you about not studying more, well, then maybe you need to get out of the house and do something.
Yeah.
Naya doesn't say. Maybe she is. Maybe she's at school and work and other stuff. But the other advice, and people always hate to hear this advice, but you're at a 146 after a year of LSAT prep. I think you need to have a bit of a look in the mirror, right? You need to have a kind of a hard conversation with yourself about, like, it sounds like you ditched the Kaplan tutor who wasn't helping you. That's great. Hopefully you're studying with us in the LSAT Demon. But I would just expect that you start showing some actual progress on your practice test scores now. Set a deadline for yourself, 1 month or something. But if you don't get into the 150s now, then I don't know, quitting is an option. I'm not telling you to stop. I'm telling you that is an option that's on the table for you.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Well,
thanks, Naya, for writing in. As you can see, I just moved this bottom email up. I don't know if you're willing to talk about this one, but it seems to tie into what you were just talking about. So I thought we should skip to it.
Sure.
I'll read it really quick. It says, hello, LSAT Demon. I did the LSAT diagnostic and scored a 123 on my first try, and I need a 157 to go to law school. There's by the way, there's absolutely no punctuation in this email.
Right.
Do you know if there are any courses I can do to help me improve to improve it to a 157? Sincerely anonymous. Yeah, I'll let you
Yeah, well, okay.
talk about this.
I understand that I appreciate that you're writing into the show for advice. I'm going to give you honest, unfiltered advice. The first thing I notice about this email is that it has, in one sentence, it has 5 mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean,
At least,
it's a run-on sentence. It's capitalizing diagnostic for no reason. It's capitalizing law school for no reason. It's got a missing word on, do you know if there, Ben just read it as, do you know if there are any courses? But that's not what it says. What it says is, do you know if there are any courses? And then any courses I can do that help me, and not will help me, but just that help me. And then the word improve is in improve, improve, which is just a typo. It's just, but it's like, I get it. You did not take the time to copy edit your question that you sent in. Fine. Yes, I understand. I mean, why didn't you take this? Like, it's not that hard to,
yes, true. But I would never even write this as a text.
Right. It's
I'm
not
sorry.
lawyership.
Maybe I'm just too, anal about these kind of things, but I would never shoot this off to someone in a text. It would never even get created.
Start your law career now. Get in the habit of sending edited shit. It's just like,
or somewhat edited, or
lawyers are extremely detail oriented people, and I'm not saying that you don't have the aptitude, but you're certainly not demonstrating it with this question. And so what am I to understand about your situation? Like, I want to help you as much as I possibly can. So like, I don't know, that just doesn't look like anything that any lawyer would ever write, which makes me think like, well, maybe you're barking up the wrong tree. And as far as the facts that are actually provided here, let's talk about what a 123 diagnostic means.
So that means you're doing worse than guessing.
Yes, it's worse than random chance. So, I think we are to assume that Anonymous gave this a reasonable try. I mean, they're capitalizing it, LSAT diagnostic, as if it's like something that they took seriously. And, so sat there for 35 minutes times 3 and ended up with a score that is literally worse than just randomly guessing on every question. So you have subtracted value in that 35 minutes per section that you were sitting there.
Yeah. This is getting 17% correct rather than 20%, which is what you'd like.
20% you would get from just random chance. And now, okay, so they don't know that they're supposed to just randomly bubble in guesses. I'm sure that they did not bubble in guesses randomly.
Okay, fair enough.
But still, surely they must have attempted 10 questions per section. And of those 10 that they attempted, they really only got like 3 or 4 of them right. So it's just like, it's just only very barely over random guessing, even on the very easiest questions on the entire test.
Yep.
So it's not an intelligence test. I'm not judging you. I'm not even saying anything necessarily about your potential. What I am saying is that a 123 indicates you understood almost nothing. Like, it's just you did not get it at all. And you are trying to enter into a field where many of your competitors score 157 on their very first practice test. Which means that they do get a lot of it. Not all of it, but they do get a lot of it. Like, they just read it carefully and understand it and get it right.
Yeah.
because ultimately these questions do make perfect sense. Especially the easy ones are really, really easy. You just have to be careful. You have to read them carefully and answer the question. And with a 123, you're not. You're not reading carefully. You're picking answers that just simply do not answer the question at all.
Yeah.
Okay. I need a 157 to go to law school. Oddly specific, isn't it?
Oddly specific. It's like, okay, where did you get that number? Maybe he or she has a school in mind that
it leads me to believe that they have a particular law school in mind, and that law school is probably predatory. Like I think that this is one of these law schools that Ben and I would probably say shouldn't even exist. I think that they're telling this person, yeah, you need you got to get that up to a 157, then you're in.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I would say a 157 is higher than I would expect some of these predatory schools to accept. I feel like they even accept school scores in the 140s, right?
Yeah, it's still oddly specific and oddly low, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like that's a score that would never get you into any top law school for sure. Mm-hmm. So it's a regional school. It's some specific school where she thinks if she gets this number, she's going to get in.
Yeah.
And I just think I'm just giving you my honest advice. I think that might be the worst thing that ever happened to you. If you did get that 157, I think they're going to charge you full price. And I think it's going to be the worst thing that ever happened to you.
So you're going to spend time and money to go up 34 points, which is no small miracle, and then end up spending more money, go into debt, and walk away with a degree that you may or may not use.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about that part of this, right? To go from a 123 to a 157, that would be like the largest increase I have ever seen in my entire career of teaching LSAT. We have seen a few people, right, Ben? I know you've seen a couple and I've seen a couple. We've seen a couple in 15. What do we have? A combined 30 years of experience teaching LSAT now, almost.
Yeah.
Right? Like we've been doing this for a while. We've worked with thousands of students. The biggest improvement I've ever seen is around 30 points. And that's usually after a year or 2 years worth of prep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an extremely uphill battle. I believe that if anybody could do it for you, it's probably us. Like, I think that we're the best at what we do. I really do. I think that if anybody could help this person actually improve to a 157, and we can talk about that part too. We'll go there after we finish this bit of it. We'll go there to like, here's what you would have to do. I think that we're the right choice. I do. I really think that we could help you. If anybody could help you, I think it's probably us. But I think we could potentially help you more by it's your choice. It's your life. But, if you asked me, should I do this? I would say, man, I don't know, because I would get paid to do it. And I think Ben and I are the ones who could help you the most. You would pay us for that. And I just think we might be doing you a disservice if we did.
Yeah.
Because I'm just so worried that you're going to improve to a 157. You're going to go pay full price for a marginal at best law school, and you're not going to end up with a legal career out of it.
Yeah.
You're going to end up with a lifetime of debt. And it's like, I would get paid. I can't get paid to do that. I do not want to get paid to sell people the dream. I just like, that's not morally, I would not feel good about it.
Agreed.
Now, this 157, I mean, it could be that anonymous is saying, oh, I looked at your scholarship estimator, and if I get a 157, I'm going to get a full ride.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then forget about all that I just said. I mean, it's still going to be an extreme challenge for you to get to that point. We'll talk about that next. But if 157 is going to be the full ride that will get you to law school, then great. But if 157 is going to get you admitted to law school and you have to pay full price, then I think that would be a bad decision.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. If you have to pay full price at 157, you probably shouldn't start on this journey. I would say that although the 30 to 35 point increase is extraordinarily rare, extraordinarily difficult, I do feel like it's I don't know, actually. I was going to say, I feel like it's easier to go up that number of points when you start lower. I do think that's true, but I don't think it's true when you start really low.
It's just that the outcomes are so bad. Even if you make, like, you could make a 20-point improvement and that would guaranteed be terrible for you. Like, you make a 20-point improvement to a 143, there's no way you're going to get a scholarship to law school. Any law school that would admit you is a terrible law school. You're not going to have good outcomes.
Right now, the LSAT is preventing you from going to law school, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and what it's meant for, and what, like, that, what it should be used for is like preventing people from getting ripped off. Right? The American Bar Association doesn't do it anymore. They're supposed to be holding law schools to higher standards and not letting them be predatory. But they don't do that anymore. They just go ahead and keep accrediting schools that have very bad career outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, right now, the LSAT, is, you think it's your enemy, but it's actually your friend, because it's protecting you from getting ripped off by whatever law school. But if you improve by 20 points, now all of a sudden the sharks are going to be circling.
Yeah.
So that would be the worst thing Ben and I could do for you, is to improve your score by 20 points, which is no easy task. Like, 20 points is, when people improve by 20 points, I'm like, wow, yeah, I mean, that's amazing. That's great. Awesome.
So,
and she wants 30 points, 34 points.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's make some assumptions here that are extraordinarily generous, but to further this conversation, right? So one, let's assume that the 157 is to go to law school for free. Let's also assume that the 123 is an extraordinary fluke. It's not it's a little bit of a stretch, but not totally crazy.
Well,
maybe
clearly not bubbling it, like, didn't even know that there's no penalty for guessing, right? Like, didn't bother to bubble in guesses on the questions she didn't attempt. That's a generous assumption in her favor. No prior prep, raw diagnostic, knows nothing about the test whatsoever, but a 157 will get her a full ride.
Okay. And so let's assume that, with a little bit of LSAT familiarity, you can bump this up to the high 130s. You still have 20 points to go to get to that 157. What are you going to do? Well, if you decide to invest the time and effort needed, despite all that we're saying, and you decide to go with LSAT Demon, I initially see you doing a lot of drilling, which doesn't mean doing a lot of questions every day. It just means doing one question in drilling. And it's going to start with the easier ones. That's what the Demon does. It starts with the easier ones and it increases your difficulty until it figures out that it's at about the right level. For you, it's going to stay low for a while because you're not going to be doing as well, or you're going to be taking a really long time. But that's the only way I see you getting your mind wrapped around the test in a solid, reasonable, predictable, straightforward way to get you on a path that will lead to a 20-point increase. Slowly doing one question at a time, really understanding them, and then going to the next one.
I actually think we could get you into the 130s almost immediately. I mean, and that would actually be what I would be looking for you if you do decide. I think that failing fast is a really good strategy in a lot of things, right? Like in business, that's one thing that they teach you in business school is to fail fast. So find a minimal viable product. And if people aren't buying it, give up and try something else.
Yeah.
To translate that to the LSAT, I think Anonymous needs to either get into the 130s within a month at the most.
At the most, yeah.
You need to get into the 130s immediately or quit. Because like, if you can't get into the 130s immediately, then you're just like, because think about like what you have to do to get into the 130s. Step one, always bubble in an answer to every question. You don't have to attempt every question. You can't attempt every question. You should not be even thinking about attempting every question.
Yeah.
But there's no penalty for guessing. You're going to get 1 out of 5 guesses right. Currently, you're actually scoring less than 1 out of 5 on the entire test. So you can you could literally improve your score by just randomly guessing on every question. So don't leave questions blank. That's number one. The time to do that is at the 5-minute warning. When the 5-minute warning goes off, you bubble in a guess for every remaining question in the section. Your score should immediately improve, at least into the high 120s.
And then you only have to get 6 or 7 correct.
That's what I was going to say is,
yeah.
So what you need to do is on logical reasoning, you need to get numbers 1 through 5 correct. Let's start with that. Those are the easiest ones. You need to get numbers 1 through 5 correct and randomly guess on the rest of the section. In reading comp, you need to read one passage and answer the questions correctly for that one passage. And for games, you need to do one game. You need to do probably the first game. That's probably the easiest one. You need to do that one game. You need to spend the entire 35 minutes on that one game, and you need to get it right. You just need to answer those questions correctly because they have given you all the information to solve them perfectly. You just have to figure it out. And you have to sit there. You have to be patient. You have to read it carefully and you have to figure it out. And you have to answer those questions correctly. And we can help you with all that stuff. I mean, in the Demon, there's video explanations, there's written explanations, there's an ask button, there's a whole team of people who can help you. But at this very basic level, you're not understanding anything at all. Yeah. And we have to get you on at least on board with the idea that you can understand the easiest parts of this test. If you understand the bare minimum, easiest parts of the test, you should immediately be scoring in the 130s.
Well, it's crazy because if you randomly guess, if you do one game, one reading comp passage, and you get the first 6 to 7 questions right in logical reasoning,
okay,
which is the same for all 3 sections, right?
Sure. So 6 or 7 points per section, plus the guesses.
Plus the guesses, you should be between 138 and 142.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
right.
That is not much work. That is minimal.
Yeah, and this advice actually does have, implications. Like all the people out there who are in the 130s right now need to be listening to this because you should probably be in the low 140s almost immediately. If you're understanding anything at all, you should be in the 140s. So I said Anonymous needs to get into the 130s, but yeah, I mean, now that I think about it, you need to be in the 140s within a month because all that requires is any shred of understanding. Really, like that's a tough pill, I'm sure, for a lot of people to swallow. But if you're in the 120s or the 130s, you're understanding almost nothing. And we got to get you to understand. You have to start understanding something. I mean, that's our whole philosophy. Is that, you're ultimately, this test does make sense. People who read carefully can figure out the answers to these questions, and especially on the easiest stuff. So to get to 140, you need to only be understanding, the easiest reading comp passage, the easiest game, the easiest LR questions. Don't bite off more than you could chew. Just simply get the first 6 or 7 questions in each section and then guess on everything else.
Yeah.
That should give you plenty of time. That should be ample time for anybody to get the first game, first passage, first 5 or 6, 7 LR questions in the section. And that's already 140. So that would be that'd be a 17-point improvement for anonymous. What's the next step? Let's say she gets there in a month. She's at 140. Now, what do you say?
Keep going with drilling, and then occasionally, a time section.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say, good job. Congratulations. That's great. You're starting to understand some of the test now. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then, to get from 140 to 150, you probably have to double that, right? And that's not, this is real talk for people who are currently scoring 141 or 142.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you need to get into the 150s like right now. Like, I mean, you've got like a month. I would only really try for like a month.
Yeah.
To get into the 150s from the 140s, because all you have to do to get into the 150s, I can see Ben doing some math, but to get to the 150s, I think all you need is like, let's get questions 1 through 12 on each section.
Yeah.
You need the first 12 LR questions. You need 2 reading comp passages and 2 games. So roughly half of each section. Actually exactly understand right. Am I right?
Yeah. So if you get 2 games, 2 passages, about 14, 15 questions in LR, and then you guess on the rest, you're going to be scoring between 150, 153.
So that's a little more than half the, 15 LR questions, little more than half, plus the guesses, because you're still getting 1 out of 5 of those guesses.
I was saying 14.
14. LR, okay. 14. All right. So anyway, half, little more than half, maybe on the LR. It's still the easiest questions. On the first 14 on LR, there's like maybe 1 hard one. Those are the easiest questions. They're only going to get harder, and they're going to get dramatically harder after that. The last half of the section is like 5 times as hard as the first half of the section. So they're going to get dramatically harder as you get deeper into the section. You need to get the easy ones right. So if you're in the 140s and you've been stuck there for a while, I really would. I mean, I don't want to crush your dreams. I'm just telling you, if you're going to go to law school for free, if you're going to not get ripped off, you probably need more like a 160 or 165 even. And to get there, you're going to have to start understanding this test. Like it makes sense. I promise it makes sense. And our job is to help you see how it makes sense. So I'm not saying you have to do this alone, but I am saying that, like, if you can't get into the 150s from the 140s in like a month, well, then you're really just, you're not understanding anything. You're like, just not get it. You're not getting it. I'm sorry. You're not getting it.
Yeah.
So I want you to get it. And that's what we do. I mean, and by the way, this shouldn't be that discouraging for people who start in the 140s, because we have multiple teachers on the LSAT Demon staff who started in the 140s and eventually made it into the 170s.
Yeah.
A starting score in the 140s is totally fine. I do think, though, that you need to get into the 150s within like a month, roughly like a month of diligent study. Because with the proper strategy of just make sure you get the ones at the beginning of each section right, 2 games, 2 passages, half of the questions on LR, guess on all the remaining stuff, which is the hardest stuff on the test anyway, and you should start seeing practice scores in the 150s. And like, if you can't do that in a month, then you're either not focusing on actually understanding this stuff, or you're encountering some barriers which are going to be extremely difficult to overcome.
Yeah. Cool. I think it's a good rule of thumb. Try to make that progress.
Like,
that quickly.
like you need to get into you basically need to crack 140 within a month. And then you need to crack 150 within another month.
Or two. That might be a little harder, but yeah.
Depending on how low you started. But like if we are talking about like a pure raw diagnostic of 123, I do think like you got to get to 140 within, a month, maybe 6 weeks. Like if you can't get to 140 in a month or 6 weeks, you're just simply not understanding anything.
Yeah.
And to get from 140 to 150, yeah, a month, 6 weeks, like 140 is the barest understanding. And we got to go from the barest of understanding to halfway understanding half of the test, figuring out half of the test.
Yeah.
Like, and I think like in a month or two, we should be getting to that point. At that point, I would fully believe in you. At that point, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, great. Ball is rolling. Let's keep making progress. Let's make it to 155. Let's make it to 160. Let's make it to 165 and not pay for law school.
Mm-hmm.
All
cool.
Right.
So this next email is from David. He's on the LSAT Demon team. He writes, "Hey, Ben, I know you love using fitness as an analogy, so I wanted to share. I recently started a new running plan that is almost entirely based on staying in certain heart rate zones. I was incredibly frustrated by the easy pace runs because it was so much slower than what I was used to. During these runs, my early pace was way too fast and my heart rate would spike early. I could never bring it back down to a manageable level for the rest of the run. I decided to ease into the first half mile. I thought that maybe if I started out even slower, I could make up speed on the back end of the run. Immediately, my run times improved. By monitoring my heart rate, I figured out that it took my body about half a mile for it to truly warm up. After that, I could greatly improve my speed for the rest of the run, but keep my heart rate in its aerobic threshold. Within a few weeks, I was knocking minutes off my aerobic mile times. I couldn't help but remember my LSAT studies and how analogous this experience was. In the beginning, I was rushing like crazy to finish sections. I didn't have a true understanding of what I needed to do, and it showed in my accuracy. By slowing down during the stimulus, the passage, I confidently entered into questions with bold predictions. This allowed me to finish more questions in less time with greater accuracy. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. I've always loved the fitness health book recommendations you've discussed. Are you reading anything particular now? No.
Nice.
But what was I going to say? Oh, it's interesting. So I haven't gone to a baseball game in forever, but I went to the Giants Nats game 2 nights ago. I think it was 3 nights, maybe 3 nights ago. Anyways, baseball is kind of a slower sport, but one thing,
it's the slowest of sports. It's the only sport that I really ever watch, but God, is it slow. That's so boring. Yeah.
Right. So anyways, they're, when they hit, the second baseman or whatever picks up the ball and they just have to get it to first. But one thing I noticed every time is right before they threw it to the first baseman or third or whatever, whenever they're trying to make an out, it was like this moment of pause, right? They're definitely like lining up. They're like looking and then they're throwing. It's like they got the ball, and I kind of expected it to be like this smooth motion where you pick it up and then you turn and throw it. But no, almost every time it was like they picked it up and then they pivoted, and then it's like they're looking at the first baseman and then they throw it. Because it's like if you nail that, the batter's out. There's no way that runner is going to get to first before the ball does, right? But they needed that pause to make it like a solid out versus like, oh shit, now it's like a little bit off of the first baseman. They're losing control of it. And now the runner's going to second and all that shit.
I knew a golf teacher once who said that he could predict whether somebody was going to hit a good shot or a bad shot by just watching them approach the ball. Like one thing that a lot of players do, and I try to do this, is I like stand behind the ball and visualize the shot.
Okay.
Take a breath, see
from
the
that
shot
vantage point
in my mind. Well, yeah, because you got to see what see what you're trying to make the ball do, right? This visualization of it. And it's not about practice swings. Every bad golfer takes so many practice swings. It's not about practice swings. It's about knowing what you're trying to achieve. And it's much more, at least for me anyway, about like picturing it. But anyway, this teacher was like, yeah, no, I mean, I can predict whether you're going to hit a good one or a bad one. I don't have to see you swing. I can just watch you get up to the ball and then have some certainty about whether it's going to be a good one or a bad one just by what your like approach looks like, which I was always kind of stuck with me. And I think we're talking about kind of the same thing, like this, having an idea in mind, what you're trying to execute. And what David's doing here is like, hey, this is an aerobic exercise. This is like an intense experience for my cardiovascular system. And I need to keep my heart within this aerobic zone. And he's got this plan now and he's executing it and it's working out. And I really like what he said about, it sounds like wishful thinking. It sounds like magic.
Yeah.
But by slowing down during the passage, he made better predictions. Then here's the results. More questions in less time with greater accuracy.
It's so weird, actually. I just had a realization. So I was thinking about this as you were talking, and when I go to the gym, I do 3 hard sets. So I'm doing 4 to 6 reps of a heavy weight 3 times, because whatever I'm doing right now, it's like, if you can do heavier weight, that's going to lead to more progress. So, but what I realized was that when I initially started, I was doing the same weight 3 times. But then I found that I could actually go up weight if I started lower. So for example, instead of doing 80, 80, 80, I would do 75, and then I could get to 80, and then I could hit 85. Whereas if I had done 80, 80, then it was like I was struggling on that second set more than if I had done 70, which makes sense. I'm doing a little less weight, but it's like, the gains are more than I would have expected. It's like, if I start 10 pounds lower, then I'm going to end up 10 pounds higher than where I had started.
I have 2 things to say about that. Look at David's run times.
Yeah.
He's giving his aerobic system, his cardiovascular system, time to properly warm up. And then he's able to go much faster once he does that. Similar to what's happening with you with the weights.
Yeah.
The LSAT is actually designed in that way. Goes back to what we were talking about with Anonymous. You really have to make sure you master the first game, the first reading comp passage.
Yeah.
Questions 1 through 6 in the LR. Those are the easy ones. You have to do them properly. Eventually, when you do, then the next one's probably going to be harder.
Yeah.
But you'll be able to do it with no problem if you were able to do the previous one, with this slow is smooth, smooth is fast idea. Or I have always said slow down to speed up. That's the ultimate irony is that when we try to go slower, then the test opens up to us. Like, the test makes more sense. It's much more manageable if we approach it with the right mindset. I mean, it happens to me in class all the time. I'm teaching a class. I look at the clock. Oh shit, we got to get out of here. I start rushing through the setup on a game, or I misread something in a logical reasoning passage. And next thing you know, it ends up taking me twice as long because I made some silly casual mistake. And the times when I try to slow down, that's when I actually end up finishing class early.
Yeah.
Because it all comes together and it all makes sense. And I don't make these stupid mistakes. And then I just kind of effortlessly breeze through.
Yeah.
Like the more you worry about speed and try to go fast, the bigger problems you're going to have with speed.
Yep.
The more you ignore the clock and try to go slow and just try to focus on accuracy, the more it's going to make sense to you. And, it's a circle back to anonymous. We need the test to start making sense to you. So you got to do what David's doing with managing his heart rate on these runs of careful, calm, accurate. And then the test will start to open up to you, and you could eventually end up going, farther than you ever had thought possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, maybe anonymous makes a 40-point improvement and ends up in the 160s and a full ride to law school. That would be unprecedented. That would be the biggest improvement we've ever seen. But if it's possible, it's only going to come from actually understanding the content of the test.
Yeah.
And so we got to start with baby steps. That's one mistake that every student at every level tends to make, right? They think about their target score. Like the worst thing that anonymous could ever do is start going, okay, well, I have to get 18 per section right.
Yeah.
Because right now you're getting 3 per section right. And so you need to go to 6 per section first.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
All right. If you have questions or you just want to be LSAT famous, email us at help@thinkinglsat.com and we will try to answer your question on the show. If you have questions about the LSAT Demon, email that team at help@lsatdemon.com. They are super friendly. That was episode 304 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. Thanks all y'all for listening. Nice knowing you. Don't pay for law school.